thousands of refugees remain stranded in what is an increasingly crowded refugee camp right at the border between Greece and Macedonia, and they are on the Greece side. They're trying to get into Macedonia and continue their journey onward up to Western, Northern Europe. Many of the refugees say they are determined to escape to Northern and Western Europe, despite news of this possible deal in the works that would see many of them sent back to Turkey.
We don't like political. We don't like violent. If we like violent, we stay in Syria and Iraq.
This man saying they're caught up in all of this political infighting that's going on in Europe over the crisis involving migrants. Earlier today, European Union leaders announced they had reached the outlines of a deal anyway that would see thousands of migrants sent to Turkey. Now, they're not from Turkey originally, but that will be the country they are sent to. The United Nations Refugee Agency says it's concerned about that part of this plan. Listen to this.
On the face of what appears to have been agreed, we are, however, concerned about any arrangement that involves the blanket return of all individuals from one country to another without sufficiently spelled out refugee protection safeguards in keeping with international obligations.
As a footnote, Turkey would receive more funding beyond the $3 billion that has already been pledged by Europe in exchange for taking in these new migrants. Freelance journalist Natalie Carney is in Idomeni, Greece. It's a small village located right near the border between Greece and Macedonia. Natalie, good to have you on CTV here today. Let me ask you this, how this plan is actually going to work in practice, getting these people who do not want to go, getting them to Turkey.
That's a very good question, and to be quite frank, those details still haven't been thrashed out, or at least haven't been made known to us yet. That's a very, very complicated process. It's a very complicated ask. You can just imagine the logistical nightmare that's going to mean. What we do know, as you mentioned, is that Turkey has agreed to take upwards of 3,000 per day illegal, or excuse me, non-Syrian refugees and migrants who were not accepted asylum-wise in the EU back to Turkey. Now, how they will be processed in Turkey and whether they will be returned to their own country, that's still part of the details that need to be thrashed out. So this preliminary agreement that the EU said early Tuesday morning had been reached with Turkey still is very preliminary in nature.
And Natalie, that's a key point here that you just mentioned that I just want to dig a little deeper on, is this idea that we're talking about migrants who are deemed to be so-called economic migrants from countries that have been considered now safe by the EU. We're not talking necessarily about Syrians.
Well, that is correct. But even the term economic migrants, if you talk to the UNHCR, for instance, they'll tell you that the word economic migrants does not apply to the majority of these people, that only about 10% are truly economic migrants. The rest of them could seriously be classified as refugees and have legal entitlement to asylum. So the word choice is quite difficult at this point. But as far as the EU is concerned, they are only at this point accepting refugees from Iraq and from Syria. Yesterday, however, at the Idomeni camp, we heard from a lot of Iraqis that their registration papers were not being stamped. Now, this is something critical that needs to be done for them to make that crossing into Macedonia. Should the gates reopen, they've been closed for the last 24 hours. So that could be some sort of indication that maybe Iraqis might be the next nationality denied entry into the EU, as Afghans were 2 weeks ago.
Natalie, you are our eyes and ears there. You're right along this border between Greece and Macedonia in this small town. You've been to this camp. You've seen the conditions, and your heart goes out to people who are trying to flee violence, poverty, extreme situations, just trying to get their kids, their families to a better life here. What are the conditions right now in this refugee camp, this settlement camp on the border?
It has been pouring rain for the last 3 days. Today we just finally got a break of some sunshine. You can only imagine the situation. They are living in flimsy tents. First and foremost, there is a camp at this location in Idomeni, but it only is accommodating for 2,000 people. There are now upwards of 14,000 people at this one location. There are said to be another 8,000 scattered at other smaller camps in the area. But they are basically living in flimsy tents out in the fields along the road. There's a train station that has been closed down. They're living in there. They're living in cafes, gas stations, even wherever they can find a place to lay their head to wait for that rare opportunity that they may be entitled the right to go across into Macedonia. Again, it was raining, so the ground is incredibly damp. It's been very, very cold. Doctors have been complaining or reporting that there's been an increase in respiratory problems, particularly in children, as well as things such as diarrhea. The sanitation is quite dire. Their food, they're not getting enough food, so they're not eating properly. It's not a good situation.
Freelance journalist Natalie Carney in Indomini, Greece. Great to have you on the program. Get the word out there. And Natalie, we appreciate your time here on CTV.
Thank you.